I'm New Mexico attorney Nadia Cabrera-Mazio, and today we're talking about whether you should create a separate LLC or corporation for direct-to-consumer sales. The short answer is yes, it's a great idea, but you have to do it right. If you don't do it right, then it's just going to be a waste of time and money, and it's not going to give you the desired benefits. For the purposes of this video, we're going to be talking about a cow-calf rancher wanting to sell beef directly to consumers, but this framework would work well in a number of other circumstances. The main legal purpose of this framework of having separate entities for direct-to-consumer sales and to separate those sales from both the family and the family ranch operation is the liability protection from the debts of either of the businesses, so that if one goes under, it doesn't affect the other one. That's the idea. If you haven't watched the other video about protecting your assets, please go ahead and watch that, because that goes into detail about the formalities and the hoops that you have to jump through in order to make this system legally work. So the system here is we've got your family, then we've got the family ranch, and then as a separate LLC or corporation, we've got family beef. In the other video about protecting your assets, we talk about the importance of actively maintaining the liability shields. And by liability shield, I'm talking about protection from being personally responsible for the debts of the business. The same applies between two different businesses. So you don't want the family ranch business to be responsible for the debts of the family beef business. In order to maintain those strong liability shields, you have to follow certain corporate formalities, as they're called, regardless of whether you have an LLC or corporation. It's also important to note that the system only works with other entities, with legal independent entities like LLCs or corporation. You can't really have this system with a sole proprietorship, because in a sole proprietorship, there is no legal difference between the business and the business owner. There are several hoops that you have to jump through to maintain that strong liability protection between you personally and your business. When you add yet another business entity to this framework, you now have two more liability shields to strengthen and maintain. That results in a higher administrative burden. So one of the considerations for whether to adopt this system is whether you have the administrative capacity to maintain those strong liability shields. Because again, if you don't jump through all those hoops to maintain them, then this totally falls apart. And if family beef goes down, so does family ranch. And then if you don't have good boundaries here, it can affect the family as well. But through these little hoop jumping practices, you can show that you're respecting the independence of these entities and you are not treating them as an extension of yourself or as an extension of each other. So you have to follow those correct business practices. That means documenting whenever something moves from one of these businesses or from your family to another. For example, if your family owns the land, you're going to want to create a paper trail of leasing the land to your family ranch. If you're going to sell your own cows from the family ranch directly to consumers through the family beef business as a separate entity, then you need to create a paper trail of the cows being sold to that business. This is also a really good way to move money around between the entities in a legal way that does not expose you to personal responsibility for the debts of any of the businesses. They are completely different businesses, so they need separate insurance policies, they need separate bank accounts, they need separate tax returns, all of that. All of those things show the world and potentially a judge who might want to pierce the corporate veil that you are not treating these entities willy-nilly, like just moving money around and not respecting them as their own entities. So that strengthens these liability shields and will protect the other components of the framework if something happens with one of them. The other pro of this framework, especially in direct-to-consumer beef sales, is that food sales is a high-risk industry. It's probably higher risk, depending on what you're doing, than the family ranch business. So if you're engaging in activities that are higher risk, and by that I mean that it's more likely that someone will accidentally get hurt if something goes wrong, if there's just a mistake or something like that, then you want to make sure that you have this liability protection between that high risk portion of the business industry and the other components of it. In short, this is a great idea. It's a great framework, but it's only going to be effective if you take the time and energy necessary to institute systems to make sure that these liability shields are staying strong. If you let any of them fall, then you expose yourself to liability and you expose the entire system.